we heard from Ian. Anthony, please.
Well, it was unexpected that I would follow immediately after, but it so happens, and no doubt Cameron saw that there is a connection. Some years ago, I came across this quotation from Edmund Burke, who most of you will probably know was a very well-known English parliamentarian and philosopher, living before, from the time, roughly the time he was operating at the time of the American War of Independence and the French Revolution. But the point that appealed to me was the statement, the principles the principles that guide us in public and in private, as they are not of our devising, but moulded into the nature and essence of things, will endure with the sun and the moon. And on Cameron's advice, I took a swim early this morning and saw this amazing thing, the sun rise. I had never before actually, just as it came above I'd never actually before seen it as fire, the source, enormous energy to us all, the life giver to us all. So my question really that I'm looking at is, are there principles moulded into the nature and essence of things to guide us in our search for a vision of the new earth? If so, what are they, and how can we distinguish principles from mere theory and opinion? The concise Oxford Dictionary offers the following definition of principles: fundamental source, a primary element, or a fundamental truth for basis of reasoning. And it gives us an example in physics, Archimedes' principle. Now, we're probably all familiar with this principle, how Archimedes got in his bath and noted the water rising. So here's a simple way which all of us, on a daily basis, can observe laws of nature operating. And the question that I'm trying to address here is, are there some laws that apply in economics that are equally easy for us to discern? And I ask this question because if you mention the word economics to most people, their eyes glaze over and they change the subject. And with good reason. Economics has become riddled with jargon. It's no longer expressed in ordinary language. And that is not entirely accidental. As has been mentioned, I'm a publisher, and one of the books I've published is called The Corruption of Economics. And I must admit, I did at first find it quite hard to believe the evidence that was presented. But this dealt specifically with America, where 5 chairs of at university were funded by what were called the robber barons. And one of the statements, and one of the quotations given at the beginning of this book is that the arguments put forward by a particular economist to deal with the problem of poverty, they like to use the language that was used by the classical economists. So in order to confuse, they said, let's change the language. And this is why we have a very, very complicated language. Now, one of the interesting things that has happened as a result of this economic collapse has been a recognition that there is something faulty with the economics. In fact, one prominent columnist in the Times actually went so far as to say one of the few benign things that has come out of this crisis has been that economics has been shown as an emperor without clothing. Now that's quite a powerful statement. I think another important thing, coming back to this, are there some very simple principles that we can find in economics that we, as ordinary people, I'm not a trained economist, that we as ordinary people can use to exercise judgment. We live in democracies, or at least most of us, probably here, where we have a vote. But how do we vote? I mean, in my country, we often debate, talk to each other. You know, we have an election coming up. Are we going to support the Labour Party or Tories? Are we going to support the Liberals? On what basis do we support them? Have we any reasonable grounds to support them? Because after all, what distinguishes the human being is this power of reason. That's what distinguishes us. So one of the founder of the School of Economic Science made a very interesting comment in a lecture he'd given, and he said, a knowledge of economics is essential to good government, and in a democracy, a general knowledge of economics is essential to good government. A voter who votes in ignorance forges the chains which bind him. That's quite a salutary thought. So, are there then any self-evident principles of economics which we can arm ourselves to play a responsible part in ensuring good government? So let us begin with a few simple questions. Do we not need somewhere to live? Somewhere to work? Somewhere to hold a conference? That somewhere is essentially the Earth's dry surface. We can live for a time at sea, but sooner or later we need to dock to replenish. We are land animals, and that's our nature. We're all born into this world with needs and desires. We had breakfast this morning. Most of us would feel rather unhappy if we hadn't had breakfast. So we need these things. From time to time, we need a drink. These are very elementary things that all of us need. Now, we may have a taste for red wine or white wine or beer, salmon, trout, whatever. We all have different tastes, but we all have certain common fundamental needs. Without those needs, we cannot live. Now, one of the interesting requirements, it seems, that is laid upon us in this universe is that in order to satisfy our needs, we have to work. On a desert island, if there's bananas growing on a tree, you have to climb up and get them. That is work. We have organized our societies in very complex ways. We have factories, workshops, all these kind of things to refine things. But fundamentally, we're all engaged. In one sense, we're all engaged now in intellectual work to try to understand, to try to broaden our understanding. For a purpose. We here feel there is a need in the world. Thank you. So, what we need to realize, there are three very important things, and there is one more. Cooperation. So we need somewhere to work. To satisfy, we are born with needs, and to satisfy those needs, we have to work. And work is much more effective when we cooperate. So I leave you with that. Thank you. Thank you, Cameron.
Many thanks, Anthony.